Namaskar. My name is Didyananda Devapriya, and today I want to talk about neohumanism, leadership, and how to create unity when working with a wide variety of people who are coming from different religious backgrounds, social backgrounds, but also from the secular materialistic paradigm, which is actually the main one that we're embedded in now. So how can we actually bring recognition and awareness to the spiritual dimension of life as something that is just fundamentally part of our human experience without necessarily indulging in one particular religious point of view? And at the same time, what does universalism really mean? I actually chose to give this particular lecture wearing my orange uniform because I want to emphasize that universalism isn't about erasing differences. It isn't about trying to get everybody to think the same, even if I think that my way, of course, is the best. Still, that's not going to create necessarily more human unity. And this is such an important function of leadership, to be able to create a vision around a common goal, around something that we all share. And then even if we aren't friends, we can work together because we have that shared purpose. We have that common vision. This is something I think humanity really needs to cultivate more and more, a sense that we are all sharing this one planet, that we're all in it together, and that we do have a common purpose as humanity to, let's say, protect our biosphere, to work together, to allow human beings to live in harmony with the planet, and to cultivate our highest potentials. So how can we as new humanist leaders facilitate this process? And, to be universal, does that mean that I have to erase my differences? I don't think so. I think, all right, I'm going to be standing here wearing a bright orange advertisement in a way that I am part of a particular worldview. No? And yet, I am interested in finding a common ground. I'm interested not just in promoting or converting people to my point of view, but in finding a way that we can, within our current modern world, talk about spirituality in a way that creates connection and not just division. For this, we're going to be looking at one of the tools that comes out of the work of Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar from his book Liberation of Intellect, which is the seminal book of neohumanism. And we're going to look at this tool, let's just say language, that he created around understanding human beings and especially understanding how the dynamics of our society work. For this, in that book, in Liberation of Intellect, he did a rather elaborate analysis of the human mind and how it's affected by different sentiments, and at the same time, the role of rationality in regulating those sentiments. I don't have time in this shorter talk to go in depth into the different sentiments, but I want to focus on one in particular that he gave special importance to, saying this is the inner asset. It is the treasure of humanity. And this is a particular type of sentiment called devotional sentiment. Now, maybe the word devotional can conjure up some religious imagery, but I want to try and define it in a broader way. So, devotion is referring to love. But if he simply said the sentiment of love, that could easily be thought of as, I don't know, I love my friend, I love my mother, I love my cat. Actually, yes, the capacity of love is something beautiful, special, but there is certain expression of love also in other entities. There is something even more uniquely human, which is our capacity to direct love towards something transcendent, something transpersonal, towards a sense of supreme being. And that type of love can awaken in us a respect, a sense of awe, beauty, love, connection, transcendence, a feeling of something transpersonal. And this sentiment can be very powerful. These sentiments can lead towards some of the highest expressions of human experience, peak experiences, experiences that have also been called mystical experiences. All of these experiences are part of our higher, more subtle potential as human beings. And these experiences of devotional sentiment, they are something that has been documented, has been seen, has been experienced in cultures all over the world, in all different types of traditions and outside of traditions, of people who were agnostic, people who were atheists, people who didn't have a particular belief system. So there is something fundamentally human about this dimension of our experience. And it is something that science has been looking at, even looking at on the level of neurobiology and research, and looking at, comparisons across different traditions, different cultures, looking at the effects of how that influences us physiologically, but also emotionally, and also in terms of our ability to have empathy and other types of more noble qualities that are associated with human beings. These noble qualities, wisdom and transcendence, selflessness, altruism, tend to be nourished by this type of devotional sentiment. But like any sentiment is kind of a raw force. It is like fuel. It is like the gasoline of life. And at the same time, this sentiment as a raw force, if it is not regulated by rationality, it can also have its dark side. So I've already talked about some of the positive qualities associated with devotional transcendent experience. Some of them are peak experiences that human beings may or may not ever experience in their lifetimes, or very rarely. And some are more mundane, that everyone in some small way experiences. Now, when I say the dark side of devotion, what does that mean? Well, this is where that same raw force, when somebody really strongly believes, that they are doing something to please their concept of God or creation, or it's very deeply connected to their sense of the meaning of life. Just as I said earlier, all types of noble actions can be inspired by that sentiment, including all kinds of self-sacrifice. This can also lead to extremism. It can also lead to fanaticism. Unfortunately, devotional sentiment has been harnessed and utilized politically. It has been used to fight wars, because people will follow you only to a certain degree when you're only doing something for a sentiment that is less motivating, just for you as a charismatic leader. But if you awaken devotional sentiment and people feel that they're fighting for God, they can do anything. And so this is where neo-humanism brings in this concept also of the need both to recognize the spiritual dimension of life, to recognize this inner asset of devotional sentiment, and at the same time to regulate it using rationalistic mentality, to cultivate the ability to analyze things and to see if they're aligned with correct principles and if they're really ultimately going to be for the welfare of all, not just individual welfare and not just group welfare, but in service of all. That's actually where something becomes neo-humanist, is when it is in service of all. It makes sense, it's rational, it can be verified, and it harnesses that spiritual dimension of life. It recognizes it. So this is a really interesting thing, because sentiment is located within our experience. It's something we feel. It's something we experience. It's something that can be measured. Like I said, it's been documented across so many cultures. So devotional sentiment is something that can be demonstrated. A lot more difficult to create consensus around the existence or non-existence of a transcendental entity, a supreme being, how the universe was created, all of these types of philosophical concepts about, what's the position of the human being and so forth. These get a little bit more tricky because there's a lot more cultural diversity in how people relate to these concepts. And maybe eventually we'll also be able to, through rationalistic processes, to come to some kind of collective understanding as humanity. Science, certain branches of science like quantum physics seem to move in that direction towards validating that there is, consciousness as a sort of fundamental generative source of the creation. But I still think we have a long way to go to find one language that's going to satisfy everyone. However, by recognizing something that is more experiential, I feel that is that's a more accessible, more immediate, more easy way to create consensus and to build a common understanding that people can relate to, even if they're not highly intellectual, philosophical, and going into depth into these other matters. So this is where I think we can really, as leaders, try to create that common awareness that we do share something, that no matter what tradition we're coming from, these are all very special, unique aspects of human experience that deserve and need our attention and conscious cultivation. I'd like to conclude with also sharing a personal experience of that, because I recently had the honor to actually be invited to Lebanon, where we have some projects run by Amort, and there we're serving a lot of disadvantaged children and youth, and many of them coming from refugee statuses. And there we have such a diversity amongst our staff. Our staff are coming from different Muslim sects that are in opposition to each other. They're coming also from, Palestine, some of them refugees, some of them Syrian refugees, some of them are Catholics, some of them are other types of Christians, some of them are agnostic, atheists, some are practicing yoga. It was quite a diversity that I had, and I had this task to present neo-humanism and to give them something of value and to inspire them towards, neo-humanist education. So I wanted to give them a sense of that it's important to recognize and cultivate the spiritual dimension of the child. But I'm certainly not going to be in a position to successfully impose my particular tradition or point of view on them in this particular situation. Rather, I wanted to see if we could come to some type of recognition of the universality of the spiritual and the need as educators to address it and to have some type of language for that. And so when I introduced them, to neo-humanism, went through the various types of sentiments And then introduce this idea also of how transcendental experience is something that isn't the monopoly of any particular religion, but it's something common across all spiritual traditions. And this did seem to really create a sense of, yes, it's true. And yeah, it is something that we can address in the education. And we worked together on finding a way that was, a common ground by talking about love, by recognizing certain values that we all share, whatever our tradition, and how to bring about, how to cultivate wisdom, how to cultivate children that are sensitive and open to feeling and connecting to the spiritual within them and also expressed in the world around them, so that they can really awaken that neo-humanist attitude of respect, a respect for all beings that is grounded in a spiritual sense of love. And it was exciting. It was really a challenge. It was really exciting. It was really exciting to see the type of energy that it created. And so I really encourage you to, I don't have the answers for this. I more want to stimulate your thinking, stimulate your own process as leaders in thinking how can we, when we're working within society and trying to create social movement, trying to create a platform where a diversity of people can work together to create a society which gives space to the spiritual dimension of life in a way that isn't favoring one particular tradition. It isn't trying to colonize, because many traditions, even including my own, can have this approach where we try to convert everyone to our way of thinking in order to feel comfortable, or just because we sincerely believe in what we're doing and we want to share it. And that's quite natural. It's quite spontaneous. But in order to really connect and to bring about a new phase, I think, in human history, a more revolutionary change where we are able to work unitedly for the welfare of our planet in the first place, our home, to be able to share this vision of unity and diversity. Know that, yes, we are all different, but we all share something. We all share this planet. We all have the same home. We all have a spiritual dimension of life. We might experience it in different ways. We might call it by different names, but it's real, and it's something that we need to cultivate, because like any potential in the human being, it's like a seed, and if we water it, it grows. And if we don't give attention to it, it remains stagnant. So, cultivating devotion, devotional sentiment, love, and a sense of dedication, and a sense of connection to that transcendental part of our reality. This is one of our missions, I think, as new humanist leaders, to preserve, to protect that aspect of our human treasure, of the human wealth that this type of love, this special type of love represents. And that love, when it's combined, guided, regulated by rationality, by rationalistic mentality, and by a strong dedication to collective welfare, this is the strongest force in the universe. When that same devotional sentiment is not guided by rationality, then it can be harnessed, used in destructive ways to serve group agendas, to serve, limited political agendas, selfish interests, and it can become dangerous, can serve fundamentalism, fuel extremism, etc. So both are important. Bringing about, this kind of recognition and cultivating a wave of love, love for all, spiritual love, transcendent love. And at the same time, cultivating this rationalistic mentality that will regulate it, that will allow it to become a force for unity, and not a force for division, not a force for justifying one group against another and domination and all of those things, but rather serving to bring human beings closer together, serving to bring about a new humanist world. So I wish you all success in your journeys into further exploring how to do that, how to create that type of common understanding and that common awareness of devotional sentiment and of transcendental experience of our spiritual heritage as human beings. I wish you the best. Namaskar.